everyone, and welcome to The Download, featuring discussion and analysis from a Catholic perspective. I'm Christine Niles, and I'm joined today by my two co-hosts, Alex Carzon and Brad Ely. The economy is not great, to say the least, with off-the-rails inflation eating away at the pocketbooks of families around the country. Several recent news items remind us the economic difficulties that came after COVID are still with us today. For our discussion, we're going to take a look at some of the economic factors that are hurting households nationwide. So how did we get here? Clearly, inflation is still very much up, even though Biden said, oh, it's just temporary. I think there are a number of factors. Obviously, during COVID, they approved like $1 trillion relief package, and so essentially free money going to every single person. There were people at the time warning the government, warning legislators, this is going to hurt families down the road. There's no such thing as free money. And then, of course, we're sending billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine rather than focusing on spending here at home. So what does that mean? We're printing off billions of new dollars. And it's just common sense. That's what happens. That's what inflation is. The dollar is devalued. Right now, the reason that diamonds are so precious is because they're so rare. But if you could go out in your backyard and find diamonds all over the backyard, clearly it's going to be devalued, and that's really the essence of inflation. That's what's happening. Yeah,
you have a lot of factors that Biden, I think it's a lot of self-inflicted wounds, actually. One of them was under Trump, of course, all the spending, the Green New Deal, $1.2 trillion fighting climate change. Build Back Better, just trillions and trillions of dollars going out. We're at a $34 trillion deficit right now, and that when you're driving interest rates up, they're just going up and up and up. One thing, it bothers me when they're driving up interest rates because we're not doing the spending. The people aren't doing the spending. The interest rates shut us down. The interest rates does not shut the main perpetrators of spending, which is the government. They could care less about what the interest rate is. So it's really a farcical thing when you're saying, oh, we have to cool off the economy because there's too much spending out there. We need to increase interest rates. But what interest rates really does is take that $34 trillion and we had all this low interest rate, free credit card money as a country. And now they're like, oh, we're ratcheting that up. Well, that goes to the international bankers. I mean, you're talking trillions of dollars over the next, several generations just going out the door in the form of interest. That doesn't help anybody out. It's a racket. So anyway, without getting too much down that hole, but the idea of just energy. Trump, under his, the last years of his presidency, we were self-sufficient. They said we were taking care of all of our own energy needs. We were not beholden to any Nicaragua and the Middle East and all these places to get oil because we were drilling, we were producing, we were fracking, we were doing all these things. And this administration has had a war on energy. They have this concept, I want green everything. Fossil fuels bad, so therefore we need to drive the price of it right up through the roof. So it makes it, there's many reasons why they want that going on there. But tax and spend used to be a wonderful thing. Now it's borrow and spend, and it's completely untenable.
Right.
I think one of the ways, specifically, let's turn to the housing market as an example of that and how that affects individuals and not necessarily the people in Washington as much, but individual families. The interest rates for 2023 for a 30-year mortgage, which is the standard mortgage rate for most people, has gone up to almost 8% now, which is a massive increase from where it was. It's it fluctuates year to year, but even just even at the height of the pandemic, it was much lower to around the 5-6% range. And what you had happen is there was so many people that during the pandemic, I remember looking at Lowe's stock. Places like Lowe's and Home Depot, their stock was actually going up during the pandemic because people would go in and they're like, well, I'm working from home, I'm just homebound, I'm going to do housing repairs. And that drives up the value of your house slightly as you put more improvements into it. And then they're able to refinance or something like that. People get lower interest on their mortgage, and then they're not willing to sell. Once, everything kind of opened back up post-pandemic, they don't want to sell their house and go into now, I'm at a 2% interest rate for my mortgage. mortgage. Well, now I'm going to sell that and lock myself into an 8% interest rate for my mortgage. That's insane. So nobody wants to do that. So what you see is the squeeze happening because everybody that has good rates, they're just holding on to their property and saying, no, we're not going to sell. And it makes it very difficult for anybody to get into that space because the interest rates are just climbing and climbing.
Yeah, the other thing they had was just a crazy bidding war on houses that happened prior. Well, it was during the COVID time, but actually it was the BLM riots, Antifa riots. Everybody had to get out of the cities. Everybody wanted to just move, this huge movement across the country, and everybody had to buy their own house. And it was just this crazy thing that they had to buy, and they found out that they were bidding against entities like BlackRock, who just had unlimited money to throw at these housing market. So it was just create a huge bubble, massive, triple the price in some areas. I know, like in Alabama, everything doubled from April of 2021 to today, which is just 2 years. Because April 2021, we had all the riots in the summer of 2020. Not really related to COVID. It was, the George Floyd riots, Antifa riots, just everything going crazy. Summer of Love in Portland. And so now you had just 6, 7, 8 months later, you can just watch all the housing prices. In April, this took off and actually doubled in Alabama to where they're at right now. So it's completely charted, total history, and it was just an insane bidding war. There was low interest rates still at that time. Now the interest rates are so high, and the housing prices are so high. I don't know how anybody's going to afford to buy a house right now.
Yeah, and it's always the common man who's hurt. Like you said, politicians don't care because they're not affected by this. They're the ones printing off the money and spending it, and they're not feeling the hurt. We are the ones feeling the hurt. Something else, other prices that increased over the past few years, groceries. And that, we all know the effect of that. So the price of eggs went way up. I remember Aldi is one of the least expensive places you can possibly go, and I just couldn't believe it. When one carton of eggs, a dozen eggs, cost more than $4. I could not believe it. This is supposed to be like the least expensive place to shop. Now, those prices have gone back down to pretty much normal, but a lot of the other groceries have not gone down. Like the milk is still kind of high. I've got 4 kids. I actually had to start rationing the milk because I love to drink milk so much, and I was like, we got to limit how much milk you have to drink. I mean, I never thought that in the United States, you'd have to ration milk. Same thing with meat. The prices of meat have gone up, as a mother. Look, I'm a single mom of 4 children. I've always had to live on a budget. I've always had to go look for the least, expensive things and budget, all that sort of thing. I'm good at doing that. But I am feeling the pinch. I'm seeing these prices going up, and I'm like, okay, well, that's more expensive than I was expecting, so let's just forego that and take this instead. There's all sorts of sacrifices that not just me, but everybody is having to make, and it's incredibly frustrating, and it gets you so angry at our leaders because they clearly care very little for the average American.
Another policy that happened under Biden, it came out of the COVID era, where people could, you could get paid basically to stay home. One of the guys working here, Rodney Peltier at the time, did the numbers, and all of the extended unemployment, if you had COVID or you could stay at home, work at home and all this, you were actually making upwards of $16 an hour unemployed. That's what they would have to start bidding against to get you to come back to work, was a $16 an hour to stay home, or more than that to come back. I remember seeing at McDonald's, just in town here, a sign that says $18 an hour. $18 an hour to flip burgers at McDonald's. And then I was seeing signs at KFC, another fast food place, that was, $14, $15 an hour. We'll throw in this and no nights and all that, trying to get people to go there. We went just a spur of a moment. We wanted to go out to eat one night. We couldn't find a single place in town that would serve in-house, and it wasn't due to COVID, wasn't due to lockdowns. It was after that. They had nobody to tend the dining areas there. It all had to be takeout. They just couldn't. I was told, why can't? We don't have anybody to work. Right. You go to Kroger's and almost all the lines there are shut down because they have nobody to come into work. They said everybody has to get jabbed to come to work, and people get either say I'm done with that, or I did and I got sick, or whatever. or I'm just $16 an hour to stay at home and I don't have to come to work anymore. I'd rather just, give me $1 an hour, $15 an hour to work at Kroger's, $16 an hour to stay home. What are you going to do? So when they say, oh, jobs are looking good, no one's, without a job right now. Well, all these people are satisfied, not looking for work, not on the jobless rosters, because they're at home. And many of the red states went through that, and they said, well, we need to start rolling back this to get people to come back to work. Stop paying them so much to stay at home. Well, all that increased wages goes through all of the economy, and that also is driving up the price of everything. Right. So yeah.
And even though the wages are increasing, it still isn't enough. Even though it may, $18 an hour to work at McDonald's may seem like a lot, but it isn't enough to keep up with the inflation costs of the market. I was looking at a statistic, and it's a long span of time, but it's still worth noting that from 1963, again going back to the housing market, since 1963, wages have increased roughly about 12-fold. The price of a house has increased 25-fold over that same span of time. So we look at these numbers going up and we think, oh, I'm making $18 an hour working at McDonald's. That's great. I'm making so much money. But the inflation and the cost of everything is keeping up exponentially higher than that. And so at the end of the day, it ends up completely canceling itself out. And there's all these different incentives that they're pushing out. I have siblings that work in food service industry. There's all different kinds of incentives for your contract. If you stay for this period of time, we tack on this extra amount of money after, we'll promote you to this position. But then on the flip side of that, you have these massive companies like Amazon and Microsoft that are just laying people off en masse because they just have to do, their bottom line is being cut because you had a boost in sales for specifically Amazon over a period of COVID time, but now people are having to cut back on things like that. They're cutting their Netflix subscriptions, their Hulu subscriptions, their Amazon Prime, because they're having to make those tough calls. Right. And so as a result, these massive companies are laying people off, and it's just this perpetual vicious cycle. And ultimately what it leads into is more government dependency for people, and that's unfortunately what these sick people want. They want you to be dependent on them to survive. Well,
interestingly, with Amazon, Jeff Bezos profited enormously from the pandemic. I think he made something like $2 to $3 billion during COVID. Why? Because of the lockdowns. So nobody was allowed to go outside. Therefore, you couldn't go to the store. So how did you get your things? You bought them over Amazon. So enormous profits off of COVID. Meanwhile, all these mom and pop stores shutting down all over the place because they couldn't stay afloat because, again, they were forced to shut down. Now we look back and we realize that it was completely and utterly needless. It helped destroy parts of the economy while letting people like Bezos get completely rich. And also, it's important to note, too, that not all the price increases are owing to inflation. There was price gouging going on as well. I know that for a fact because I spoke with a man who was a businessman. And he said, oh, we made like a 7% profit this year. And he said, and we didn't even have to raise our prices. We were doing just fine. We just raised them for the heck of it because it was COVID. Everybody was raising their prices. We could use that as our excuse. This is someone who admitted this outright to me. So I'm wondering how many other companies were actually doing this, taking advantage of the lockdown and the pandemic to raise their prices deliberately for the profit, and not caring at all what the effect it was going to have on families.
Yeah, and then is this going to get better? Well, they're trying to rein in government spending, but they're having no, every time they're like, we're going to shut down the government, and it's like, oh, go ahead and keep spending. Every single time they get a hurdle like that. So government spending is not slowing down. We're actually opening up more wars now in the Middle East and continuing the one in the Ukraine, and probably accelerating that one soon. So you're talking about now ratcheting up massive military spending. We're also talking about, oh, China's getting bellicose, so we need to go and strong. The industrial military complex is just going to go through the roof. So government spending's not coming down. The people running the interest rates, which I say people because you can't actually audit who's on the board there as far as, all the international bankers that play. They're just going to keep driving up the interest rates because they're saying, oh, this is not cooling off, when a lot of it has nothing to do with our own little peon spending going on whatsoever. It's government spending, as we talked about, but also the supply chains. When you're having a hiccup in China, 9 out of 10 of your items come here to, on your shelf, you flip it over, it says made in China, and they're like, oh, we're having a hard time in our economy over here. Whether it's true or not, it's stuff still not coming over, so you got supply chain issues going on. We had the supply chain issues during COVID 2020. So that just filters on through. So are we having, in Ukraine, as the breadbasket of Europe, 25% of the world's grain comes from the Ukraine, also all the fertilizer from there and from Russia. So we're having, we start entering all these conflicts, and you don't think people are going to start economic warfare going on as well by constricting supply. I mean, we're always embargoing somebody or saying, oh, we're not going to ship stuff to you. Well, what happens when that happens with us? So, yeah, supply chains are going to have continued, probably increased problems. We're going to have, I don't think fuel prices are going to be coming down anytime soon because they don't have to. They went through the roof and no one actually batted an eye, or the government never said, well, we need to, tax you guys through the roof for all the extra, the windfall, profits you guys are making here. No one ever called them to the Congress.
And they have incentive to push that anyway because of, the climate change and, we want to, everybody needs an electric vehicle now, right? So there's ulterior motive to cap that up anyway. I mean, at one point in time, I remember it was it $7 in certain areas of California for a gallon of gas? At one point,
at least.
Just absolutely.
And something else that's happening too is the price of concert tickets are going up. So here, there's an article. Quote, nearly 60% of Americans say they've had to cut back on spending on live entertainment this year because of rising costs, according to a Wall Street Journal Credit Karma survey of about 1,000 U.S. consumers conducted in September. And many articles you can read, the price of concert tickets have gone up about 20% over the past couple years. So right now, the average price of, they did a survey of the top 100 concerts. The average price is more than $100 per ticket. That's really high. But I think you have information on some families who are going into debt.
Yes,
just so they can continue.
There was a survey that was done in that article that you just read. It was, I believe it was Credit Karma that did it, and it was 1,000 people that they surveyed. And of those 1,000 people, 20% of them said, look, I'm willing to go into debt because this is my lifestyle. This is just part of my routine. This is what I've done, and this is what I want to keep doing. And there was even one woman that they interviewed that she said, she was like, oh, I grew up going to concerts, and it was just a thing I did, a couple times a month, and I want my daughter to have that. And so I'm now put in a difficult, position where I have to choose between, do I spend my money, properly, or do I just, say to heck with it and just let my daughter have the experience, that I had. And that's a very dangerous mindset and mentality for people. They're going for spending isn't so much as focused on products, it's focused on experience and services rather than goods. And that's a dangerous sign for an economy. And it's not just within the concerts and everything. Entertainment, by and large, sports is another big example of this, where they shut down all the sporting events, and they had people dial in via Zoom to the NBA finals, and it was just horrible and they opened that back up, and now nobody wants a part of it. Some people have to make those cuts, but other people just say no, it's worth it, and they end up putting their own families, in financial hardship because of those choices.
Yeah, and we know so many problems. Our politicians, many of them clearly don't care. The average family is hurting, but what are some solutions that we can provide to help people to save money? Because the fact is, it's hurting everybody, and we all just have to face this and live through it. One thing I see as a benefit to this is that as Christians, we do understand the concept of sacrifice, and sacrifice can be a good thing. Sometimes it is good to deny ourselves things. It's good for the soul to be able to do that. And so, yes, we can't have all the things that we had maybe 2 years ago. I was just reading an article that said that on average, households are spending $700 more for the same household goods that they did just 2 years ago in the same month. I mean, $700 more just to buy the same household goods.
Is that per month?
Well, that was in the month of July. They said it was $700 in the month of July more, so I'm assuming it's per month.
Wow.
That's just as an average, but sacrifice can be a good thing. Learning to deny yourself can be a good thing. It's not pleasant when it happens, but it can be a good thing. And there are things that you can do to save a lot of money for a family. Little things. For instance, I love coffee. I drink coffee every single day. It's like my breakfast. I have to have my coffee. But I very rarely go out and buy coffee because the average price of a cup of coffee now is at least $3, maybe depending on what kind you get, might be $5. Imagine spending that every single day per week. I did the math. That ends up being more than $700 a year. Instead, I make coffee at home. For a fraction of the price. Tastes just as good, but a fraction of the price. There are all sorts of things that we can do to save money at home. I know your family does some things to save money.
Oh yeah, with regard to like say lunches, you know, people may say, oh, I need to go out and get a sandwich, and it's $5-6, and a bag of chips, another $1.50, and a drink. So you're pushing almost $10 by the time you're done with tax and everything like that, and that's $50 a week. And you know, if it's 50 weeks out of the year, you're looking at what, $2,500 or whatever that went out the door just for lunch. And what we do almost always, we'll have some roast. We'll get a roast that's, you know, on sale for, you know, $1.50 a pound or whatever. It may not be the choice beef roast, or it might be a pork roast or whatever, but it's or maybe a ham or something. But anyway, we always find something for less than $2 a pound. Take it home, throw it on the, you know, the grill, either marinate it or whatever. Throw it on the grill, throw it in the crock pot. You have a really nice go-to source for your lunches for Monday through Friday. You also can come home and, you know, take some of the roast and put it out with baked potato and some vegetable or something. If you want to take a little bit of it, make a fajita or something, you can do that. So we get by very cheaply on meals because of that very thing right there. It doesn't cost much for a loaf of bread. And one loaf gets you easily through the week as far as sandwiches go, and then as far as the, like I say, with the roast and that. So for I'm going to say well under $2 for, and you have a heavy sandwich that really gets you through, you know, the day. That was one thing right there, always making our own coffee. We have a French press that we really like to make coffee in. I think it brews better and steeps better and everything. But then also just, I mean, you can go to Starbucks and for $5+ get a cup of coffee. We can get a whole container of coffee that you can make coffee for like 2 weeks or more for $6.99 at Kroger. Now that price of that doubled to, you know, $12 recently, doubled in price, but they still have this, you know, clip the coupon and buy, you know, 5. So we'll buy like once a month or once every 6, well, that's more like every 2 months or more. But we'll go buy the 5 of them when they're on sale for the $6.99 thing and just put them in the, you know, in the basement. So you, once again, you kept up with buying them at cheap prices and that type of thing. So yeah, you got to shop the sales, but I mean, you're saving a lot in that one purchase there. 5 times $6, $30 on your coffee right there, getting it down to, you know, $6 for a container, which you're going to be making coffee. But compare that to, I mean, we're talking about the prices of everything going up, but man, compared to what it is to eat out.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's where you're saying, you're like, oh, this went up 50 cents or $1 or $2 now, but my goodness, to versus eating out. And this millennial, well, now the Gen Z generation, just doesn't cook. We just don't cook.
Well, you got to learn. You got to learn how to cook. I mean, that's the reason I learned how to bake bread. Because during COVID, I went to the store. I wanted to get some bread. They had taken it, like the aisles were just empty. And I was like, okay, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to go home. I'm going to bake my own bread. So that's what I do now. And for one, it's way more delicious. It's way, way, way less expensive, and it's so easy to do. And people have to learn how to start doing things themselves. It's so easy. You've got to cook at home. Oh my goodness. Fast food now is so insanely expensive. I almost never take my kids out to get fast food stuff because it's just bad for you. But once in a while, I might, you know, go grab a hamburger. And I remember what the prices were growing up. I remember what the prices were just a few years ago. I couldn't believe it. I went to one of the fast food restaurants. It might have been Wendy's or something like that. All I got were 4 burgers and fries. Pretty much that was it. It came to $29.
Oh, easily.
And I was just like, are you kidding me? This can't be right. And so I actually canceled my order. I said, okay, this is too much. So I went somewhere else. I think it was Burger King or something. Same price. I was like, okay, so this is happening everywhere. I mean, it's just insane. Yeah. It's insane.
No, I buy all my meat in bulk, and that helps per pound. That gets the cost down way much, and I just throw it all in the freezer. That's my supply for the month. Yeah. And I think, you know, people have to ask themselves, it's almost a philosophical question, you know, what is the purpose for the things that we use, just in general? Everybody, especially people with families, you have to look at that, and you really have to ask yourself that question. Food is meant to sustain us. Yes, we eat because it's comfort, it's pleasurable, and, you know, it becomes sort of this crutch that we lean on. But ultimately, we need to eat to survive, to sustain ourselves, and that's it. Same thing with living. It's nice to have a big house with extra rooms, and I've got a gaming room, and I've got my man cave, something like that. But at the end of the day,
still working on one of those for myself, but haven't been there yet.
No. But at the end of the day, no. If you have a place to live where you can, reasonably, meet the needs of, for living for, your kids or whoever it is, that's what you need. We're going to have to go back to what's sufficient for us and not live in excess. And that right there goes back to the sacrifice aspect that you were talking about.
When you brought up the concert tickets and the mother was like, oh, I have this hard decision to make whether I should spend, $50, $60, $100 on these tickets for, and I have to give her the life that I had. And my goodness, really? The hard decision is, how am I going to put food on the table tonight? That's a hard decision. And, they talk about the greatest generation. They came through World War I, they had the Great Depression, they came through World War II, and all that. But they were made to be a sturdy generation because they saw how clearly it was the difference between all those tough decisions about, should I just throw money out the door, or how do I put food on the table? And so they were mature people. They saw the value of $1. They saw the value of, providing for your family. And it wasn't a tough choice for them to say, should I go to the big city and splurge, $100, or should I use that $100 to feed my family for the rest of the month? That wasn't a hard decision for them. And hopefully, is denying yourself good thing. Well, when the cross comes, it's always a good thing from God. It's always going to make you a better person if you let it. And that's really, we've been so far out for so long in this country without those crosses that, just the smallest little cross right now just seems like it's crushing us. But after a while, we'll start to get back into being able to carry those again. And part of this is this inflationary, fiasco that we're going through right now.
Right. Archbishop Fulton Sheen said that the supreme maxim of Christianity is that the innocent pay for the guilty. Obviously, he's referring to Christ being the innocent victim paying for our sins, but I think that applies also to this situation. The guilty are the bad politicians and leaders who are doing all sorts of things that are harming this country, and then it's the little man at the bottom who really feels it. The innocent paying for the guilty, in this case, quite literally paying for the guilty. But if we trust God, remain faithful to him, we know that God will always take care of his children. He will never abandon his children. So thank you for joining us for today's show. Now please join us as we finish in prayer, begging Our Lady's intercession for our nation and the church. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Salve Regina,
Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve. A te clamamus exules filia Eve, a te suspiramus gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimalum vale. Ea ergo advocata nostra, ilos tuos misericordes oculos, ad nos converte, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post exilium ostende. O clemens, O pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you again for watching. We premiere a new episode like this at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. From all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.